Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. If you wouldn't mind just throwing something in the question box, letting me know you can hear me okay, that would be awesome. And then we'll get started in just a couple minutes. It looks like about half the folks who registered are on right now, so we'll give everyone else a couple minutes. Thanks. All right, going to give everyone just one more minute to get signed on. Looks like almost everyone's here, but just give them one more minute and we'll get started shortly. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. As we're going through, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the little question box, and I will answer them as we go, or else save some for the end as well. If anything does come up that's really specific to your program or things that you're particularly curious about, really don't hesitate to throw them in that box. I want to make sure this is as relevant and useful for you as possible. So we're going to be talking about mentoring in the workplace. For those of you who haven't been on any of our webinars before, though it looks like a lot of folks who have, my name is Jack Kavanaugh. I'm our Director of Training and Program Development for Mentor New York. Mentor New York is a statewide nonprofit organization that serves mentoring programs and helps foster mentoring cultures and workplaces and companies and all sorts of settings. And we serve programs all across the state. Our headquarters is based in New York City. I am based out of our Western New York office in Buffalo. And we are part of a national organization, a network of organizations called Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. So the elements of effective practice for mentoring are really the foundation for a lot of our work. We really lean on the elements to inform and form the basis of the work that we do with programs. So the elements of effective practice for mentoring were developed by our national office. The way they go about a lot of establishing these benchmarks for effective mentoring is by looking at programs that are successful, that have successful outcomes. and spending time thinking about what do they do, what do they have in common, right? What are things that they're all doing? And so they break it down into six sections rather: recruitment, screening, training, matching, initiating, monitoring, support, and closure. And so the benchmarks and everything for this are really, really, really helpful if you are looking at your program and how to best, what kind of improvements you can make, how to assess your program and things like that. They're all available online for free at mentoring.org. They also have supplements to the elements of effective practice. So that's going to be a lot of what we're going to kind of draw on today, especially for the first part of today's webinar, is the supplement that's relative to the recommendations for workplace mentoring. It doesn't look like someone can hear me. Can someone let me know if everyone can hear me? Okay, good. So it's probably just someone on their end. I'll just let them know. Sorry. Always just want to make sure people can hear. Okay, great. So there's supplements to the elements of effective practice for specific types of programs. So for example, the one we'll be talking about today is some recommendations around workplace mentoring. They also have supplements for mentoring LGBTQ youth. They have a supplement for mentoring in STEM programs, as well as one for e-mentoring or virtual mentoring. So those are great tools. As we're talking about this today, these webinars, we typically try to finish them up by about 2:45 to leave about 10, 15 minutes or so for questions. So, this is going to be a pretty high level overview. Not going to get too in the weeds because we want to, be respectful of everyone's time and get as much information as possible across. But as I said, if there are specific questions you have about your program, do let me know. I'm happy to discuss specific programmatic needs, perhaps, more in detail instead of just, kind of guessing what people are currently struggling with. So that said, it's a pretty high level view. We'll talk more about how to kind of get in touch with us to do more in-depth work towards the end. So we're going to start with just a quick poll. I like to do at least two polls at the beginning. First one. First one's up now. Let's see. Give people another couple seconds to vote. Okay. Give that about 10 seconds or so. Just let me know how you're feeling today. All right. So most people are doing pretty good. That's good. That's a good sign. We always do this on Wednesdays, and it's important to try to keep our Wednesdays from being too terrible. All right, let's do one more. So for this one, you'll be able to select more than one option. Just kind of want to get a sense of who's in the room. So select as many as apply to you. All right, give it another 10 seconds or so. Just give me a reply. All right. Awesome. So pretty good diversity of folks. Some people have a mentoring, so we want to develop one in their work. People working in the corporate world use mentoring field. Awesome. All right, so we're going to start talking through some of this and some of the recommendations. So it's important to first talk about why it's important to have a talk about mentoring in the workplace and why it's important for a few reasons. So the first thing that I think is really important around mentoring and having workplace mentoring programs is it really helps strengthen talent pipelines, particularly around DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of mentoring programs, in the workplace also double as leadership development programs, right? So if you're mentoring folks who are already employees, or people who are coming in along your talent pipeline via internships, local high school, college students. One of the things that's really beneficial about doing that is it's going to allow folks who might not typically have access to your, say you're, working with local college and high school students, access to your workplace or your field, and so being able to leverage mentoring in the workplace through programs like that allows breaking down some of the barriers, particularly around social capital and things like that we've built up that allow access to workplaces. Social capital being access to people, knowledge, and communities that are helpful. So, for example, having a family member who knows how to help you submit a job application is an example of social capital, right? Or having a teacher who knows someone who's hiring at a company that you want to work at is an example of social capital. And so for a lot of, whether that's people in lower income communities or Black and brown communities, some of that social capital, when it comes to employment in, the corporate world or other, white collar industries, or just depending on the field, might be less strong. And so being able to put in place pipelines that reach out to young people in communities that might not have a relationship or natural, quote unquote, social capital to your organization is going to help you bring on people who might not typically be able to find their way inside. And so, I know a lot of companies right now are thinking a lot around how do we increase DEI in our work? How do we, change some of our programs, policies, and structures to promote racial equity and things like that. And, I found in my experience, a lot of times when organizations have that conversation, a lot of what they're talking about is how to best support people who are already in their organization, which is good. But we also have to remember that we have to, build pipelines and resources to get people who haven't historically been part of your organization to be part of it. The other part of it is, certainly talent pipelines for people who are already in the company. So, for example, if you have folks working for you who are new employees, who might be younger, talking 16 to 25, might be their first or maybe second job, or, maybe they had a few, they've worked in other places, other industries, but this is their first experience in navigating the particular realities of working in your field. Mentoring can really help with retention and with employee satisfaction, and really just, I guess, just trying to think of a better way to say it, but just making it a place that they want to work at, a place where they'll be successful working. Because again, part of that social capital, that mentoring, I think mentoring as a whole is really about helping young people tap into other people's social capital. And so, helping grow those social networks. And so, part of working in the, in a workplace is knowing how to navigate that workplace, knowing who do I talk to about this issue? What's appropriate dress? What time do I show up? What do I do about lunch? What's transportation? How do I get there? How do I leave? All of those pieces of working at a job that's not just how to fulfill those job duties. Having someone in place to be a mentor is going to help a lot in helping young people and who might be their first, maybe second job navigate those issues. Second reason it's important is engaging opportunity youth. Opportunity youth is, term that's used fairly broadly. I think when we use it, we typically mean folks who are about 16 to 25, who are may not be currently in school or working, but are looking for opportunities. And so creating opportunities within your organization to bring those folks in is a great way to build your talent pipeline, right? So through mentoring programs, through apprenticeship programs, through internship programs, tapping into and accessing folks who could be really successful in your industry or in your field, but need a little bit of an extra social support to be successful once they get there. And it's particularly important at the entry point into the workforce. So that was one thing they found when they were doing a lot of this research, was that mentoring programs like this were most effective when that young person was first entering into the workforce. So whether they were coming in at 16 or 24 or whenever that was, that transition to that first real employment, that first major piece of employment, that's really where mentoring like this comes into play most effectively. I think generally speaking, mentoring as an intervention is most effective in times of transition. So you'll see, and so you might run programs that mentor young people from the transition into high school or high school to college, or things like that, where there's major life transitions. That's really somewhere where mentoring can make a huge impact, and employment is no different. So for the first couple slides on here, I'm going to talk a bit more in detail about some of the recommendations that we're making around, and some of the research indicated around what successful programs had in common for mentoring young people in a employment setting. And then we'll talk about some specific strategies around, how do we make employees and employers have more of a mentoring relationship that's supervised and managed as more of a place of mentoring. But first, we're going to talk about this. So a couple of things that they found. One was that there's complex but flexible programs that grow with mentees. So, programs when we're dealing with especially complex employer settings, so larger organizations, whether that's corporate settings or larger nonprofits, that the program has to be fairly complex in what it's offering, because there's going to be a wide range of needs, of content, of what they want to be requiring. So looking at different curriculums, right, activities, things like that, it's all going to be very complex. And there's going to be lots of, maybe this person's, we'll talk more about distributive mentoring in a minute, but the idea that, maybe they're going to be working with the person who runs this department first, and they'll go meet this person who runs this department so they can get the sense of what's happening. But ultimately, they're flexible in that they're able to meet the mentees where they are and what they need. And they're able to grow with mentees, which I thought was really, there's a lot of case examples. And so some ones they looked at were ones that, as the mentee is able to move up in their career over, 1, 2, 3 years, they're able to meet them where they're at in terms of helping them develop those leadership skills. And so, like I said, a lot of these mentoring programs in employment settings can be billed a lot as, leadership development programs, pipeline development, talent development, things like that. And so part of why that's as effective as it is because they're able to be flexible, that grow with the mentees as they develop in their career, right? So when they're first coming in for the first year that they're there, they're gonna have different needs than they will, say, 3 or 4 years in. But that doesn't mean they'll stop needing, mentors who are able to provide some support. It's just gonna change what they need from those mentors. And so that's that flexibility. Particularly in programs, sometimes you'll see things like, if they're running an internship program, say for high school and college students, or, something that's more short term, really emphasizing job-related skills and hands-on learning, particularly when the timeline is shorter. So obviously, if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 years where you have existing employees, they're getting matched up, and there's some, supportive relationship that builds over time, you're able to kind of build up a bit more of that gradually. But particularly for, programs that maybe it's just an 8-week summer program for, new employees just to kind of get them acclimated, or, it's a summer program or over a semester with local high school or college students who are coming to get job experience, focusing less on some of the psychosocial supports, but more on those really specific, hands-on job-related skills is really going to be more effective, because a lot of that other stuff takes so much more time to develop that if you really want to get key outcomes as high as possible, being as specific and hands-on as possible is really going to help. And then a high frequency of interaction, regardless of where and when the program happening, if they're in the same workplace, then really trying to emphasize, connecting as frequently as possible, providing as much of that active mentoring as possible, particularly if they're working in the same building and things like that. But that's something that's true of any type of mentoring program or any type of mentoring relationship, is that the more time they spend together and over a longer amount of time, more frequently, but also over longer periods, is going to produce stronger outcomes. But I find that, in programs in the workplace, it's important to be particularly cognizant of that, because, when we're doing work, it can be really easy to just, let things go off by the wayside, not spend as much time really deeply engaging with the mentees, just sort of focusing just on like work. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we haven't met and actually had our, mentoring session in a while, things like that. And so one of the really important things to emphasize, and we're not going to go over all of the recommendations around the elements of effective practice, about recruitment, screening, training. We don't have time for that. But I thought recruitment was the part that was most what's the word? Some recommendations were most helpful, because I think that's something that most of the programs tend to struggle with a bit, because I think a lot of times we'll either say on one hand, not give enough background, not give enough structure, not give enough detail when we're doing our recruitment, especially in a work setting when we just think that people should do it, or like my boss just told me I have to be here. So we're not having those really clear conversations, or it's overly just like prescriptive and overly drawn out, in which case it stops being organic. So part of that really recruitment is where everything else kind of trickles down from. So we start with recruitment. First is emphasizing the support of the organizational leadership. People are going to want to engage in a program that they feel like, the high levels of people at their office are supportive of. So, if you're able to get, as many of the sort of head honchos, so to speak, to come down and support the program, maybe when you're doing recruitment, coming in and having them, just say something and appear and just like, this is a program we really support, putting it up in front and center, things like that can be really helpful. The second thing is, the time commitment and work time. And being really clear about time commitment is very important, regardless of what kind of setting, you're mentoring in. But particularly in a workplace setting, people want to know, am I going to be paid for this? Does this come out of my work time? Is this over and above, the time I'm expected to be here doing my work? How is this going to affect my usual work hours? And what is specifically that time commitment? People really want to make sure that their time is respected, particularly when they're, at work. We don't want to spend much more time at work than we have to, even if we love our job. So being really clear about that. And again, especially, is this something that is on work time? Am I getting paid for it? Is it beyond my 40 hours a week that I'm volunteering, or is there extra stipend that comes with it? We want to make sure that the relationship between, work and money is very different than just expecting your employees to volunteer their time. You want to develop a really clear profile of what type of, it says mentee, but really mentee and mentor you're looking for. I think this is, again, really true in a lot of ways, but particularly in a setting where you're drawing from a specific pool, like people employed at a specific company, or young people at a specific school. We can be really easy to always be pulling out the same kind of bright, shiny folks. So if I go to a company and say we're looking for a mentoring program for young people in the community. You know, do you have some employees who might be really great mentors? You know, or we're looking to start a mentoring program for new employees. We'd love to get some mentors. A lot of people are going to think of the same 4 or 5 people for that. They think of for the same 4 or 5 leadership opportunities everywhere. And that doesn't mean that they're actually going to be the best or perhaps the most effective mentors. So having that, and the same on the mentee side, right? So if I go to the school or community center and say, you know, we're looking for young people to be mentored as part of this, you know, work experience program, you know, or if you go to HR during the hiring process and say, you know, we want to get some, you know, up and coming, bright and shiny new stars to, you know, be part of our mentor program and be mentored coming into the organization. You know, you're relying a lot on other people's judgment of who's going to be right for your program. So the clear of a profile of the mentor mentee that you can have is especially important when you're, again, drawing from a specific pool or relying on other people to help you do some of that recruitment. And so, you know, when you're thinking about mentors and mentees for a program like this, you know, do you want mentors who are particularly strong at communication skills? Perhaps you want mentors who had a struggle coming into the organization, but, you know, found their footing and, you know, found, you know, their way to a supervisory position, things like that. You know, what types of mentees are you looking for? Is it just people who are, you know, the stars? Are you looking for people who, you know, you feel like might need a little extra support to be successful? Things like that are really going to help you get a better sense of what you're looking for and help other people get to them. You want to really communicate the benefits of being a part of the program. You want it to come from a strengths-based perspective. We're going to talk more about making sure we use a growth mindset perspective when doing these types of things later on. But, you know, we don't want these things to come off as like a punishment, especially for the mentees. You know, we don't want them to feel like we're saying, hey, you seem like you're really not going to do a great job at work, so we're going to give you a second supervisor who's going to kind of just hold your hand and walk you through this process. Like that doesn't, no one wants to be part of a program that communicates that. What we want to say is, you know, you seem really promising. We're so excited to have you on board. We think you have a bright future here. We want to help make you part of our mentoring program to help develop your leadership skills so that way you can, you know, make that bright future a reality, right? It's about potential, it's about growth, and it's about the benefits that they're going to get out of it. Same with the mentors. And ultimately, you want people, especially on the mentor side, who like their jobs and are like happy to work there and enjoy the company. Because again, if we're thinking about this from a talent pipeline perspective, as well as from a, you know, people with a functional relationship with work, you know, we don't want people that are burning out. We don't want people that are, you know, dealing with a lot more stress and anxiety. We want to make this a positive and fun experience as much as we can. So a couple other tips. You know, like I said, I think recruitment is one of the big ones, and there's lots of other things that I'm not going into that are part of the full report. I'll send it to everyone who is registered probably later this week. So you'll be able to look through that completely. But when it comes to matching based on similar experience was really, I think, important. So, you know, if you have, like I was saying before, mentors who perhaps they struggled a little early on, but as well as when you're matching, you know, thinking about people who are in the same section of work, where they might be part of the same team, you know, things like that are really going to make a stronger relationship, because part of what we want to do is make the mentee more fully integrated into the fabric of the workplace. And so if we think about it as a relationship, you know, between the mentor and the mentee, then having that sort of shared experience is, or, you know, being in a similar field. So, you know, for example, I was part of a mentoring program at a position I used to work at. My background is in social work, and they would pair us with, you know, people who are at least similar. We worked in substance abuse, so they would pair people in the substance abuse section of the organization, and then the other parts would have their own, you know, program. But it made more sense to pair someone like me who was coming into the field working in the substance abuse. Then it wouldn't really have made a whole ton of sense for me to be mentored by someone who's in HR with a completely different background than me. And if you have people that went to like the same schools, things like that, that can be even better. Same goes across for for like internship programs, things like that. We want to make sure that we're setting people up for success. I mentioned distributed mentoring earlier. I actually hadn't heard this term used for it before, but I thought it was really interesting. But distributed mentoring is just the idea that instead of having someone get paired one-to-one with a single mentor, that perhaps they work with a handful of folks. So they might spend a couple of weeks getting mentored by someone in different departments or various levels of supervisory experience, things like that, especially for these types of programs where we're thinking about, again, how do we maximize the mentees' social capital and access to social capital. We want to help them draw out their network as much as possible. And so this sort of distributed mentoring model is really helpful for that, because it allows the mentee to really draw out and broaden their how many people they're able to connect with over time. Another thing to think about is pre-internship programs, particularly thinking about talent pipeline, thinking about supporting young people before they even enter your workforce. You might have an internship program or an apprenticeship program or work experience, things like that. But even doing smaller, more lightweight touch points before that can help build that pipeline even further. So maybe going out into the school, say you have a partnership with a high school, and going out to that school and spending time, bringing some stuff there and doing like speed mentoring or things like that that are a lot lighter weight, can be really helpful in building that talent pipeline. And they found that you're really more likely to get mentees who stick through a whole program that way, because they already know you. All right. All right, so I'm going to take a second. We're going to switch into some strategies for engagement and structure and programming and kind of that managing with a mentoring mindset type idea. So I'm going to take a 60-second pause so people type in any questions or thoughts that you have. Feel free, and then we'll get started. All right, so we'll get moving on. We have two quick questions. One is just, are we going to get a copy? Yes, all of them, I believe, are recorded and posted to our website, which is, yes, okay, good. I did hit record, started. Did want to double check. Yeah, so they're all recorded, and as well as I'll send you the slides and a link to the recording and any resources as well when we're finished. Second question says, in a large organization, how can you roll out a system-wide mentoring program, pilot one group in a single region, or multiple cohorts across various regions, focus on level, manager above, et cetera? So it's going to depend a lot on your specific program. I think without knowing the details of your organization, and we can talk more about this in detail afterwards, feel free to, we can reach out and connect, and I'll shoot you an email later. But my first thought would be to have a pilot in either one region or a couple regions, but focus especially on lower level, entry level employees, particularly as they come in. I think that would be, especially if you're thinking in terms of retaining a talent pipeline and growing that from that perspective, that's going to be your best bet. But you more than anything, when you're designing a program like this, you really want to start with the question. And this is, again, I would tell this to anyone who's talking about starting a mentoring program, regardless of where, whether it's in the workplace or in a school or whatever. But the very first question you have to ask yourself is, what is our program goals? What is our program about? What are we trying to do? Is our program about, employee retention? Is it about, developing stronger manager level employees and leadership skills? Is it about, DEI work specifically and growing a stronger and more diverse workforce, especially at this manager, and above level? So without knowing that, I think it's harder to really say. But to me, that's the first question that I would start with is, what is our program about? What are we trying to do? What is the function of our program? And then from there, it's going to help inform what that pilot is going to look like. And so, again, we can talk more specifically about any of your organizations. Let me see if anything else is on here. All right, well, we'll keep going to the next one. Those are great questions. I appreciate that. If you have other ones, feel free to throw them in there. I'll try to check occasionally, might talk at the end. So we're going to talk about the Connect, Focus, Grow framework. We only have about 15, 20 minutes left. And so I'm going to go through this and then talk about a couple other things. So the Connect, Focus, Grow framework was a model that was developed by Mentor National, our national office, with a collaboration with the Shelf Foundation, which is Starbucks philanthropic arm, to develop a curriculum and framework for employees and managers to use. If this is something that seems interesting to you, I'll talk more about it at the end, but I'm happy to talk more specifically about rolling this out a lot more in depth as part of your organization, because it's really, I'm going to give you an overview of kind of the framework that you can kind of take and figure out how you want to manage it. But, it's a much deeper curriculum and framework and set of trainings and materials that we also have that I can talk to you more about. But again, just don't have a lot of time to get too in depth. So the idea of the Connect, Focus, Grow framework is that it prioritizes relationship building, goal setting, and growth mindset to set managers, mentors, and youth up for success. So start with the Connect is all about that relationship building, right? So making sure that the relationship comes first. I always think of the importance of relationships as being about building like pipeline or like a telephone wire. It's just a method of communication, right? It's infrastructure. It doesn't really matter what you're trying to get across that pipeline or across that wire or transmit or communicate if you don't build the infrastructure there first. I am much less likely, I don't know about you guys, but for me, much less likely to take seriously someone who is trying to teach me something or talk to me about something if I don't feel like they care about me as a person or like have taken the time to communicate and build that relationship first, right? And so it's all about balancing that teaching and learning. That the relationship means that it's not just this didactic, you have a supervisor or a manager who's mentoring you, but is really just trying to teach you things. It's about building that relationship through a space of curiosity and creating those inclusive environments where the mentees can feel like I can come up and show up here as my full self and value what that this is a space that values what I bring to the table. And then you build that focus, which is really about that goal setting and leveraging strengths and skills. So we built that relationship, and then you're going to start really thinking about how do I focus in on what I actually want to get out of this? What are my career goals? What am I strong at? What am I good at? And the mentor helps the mentee start parsing out, those types of those goals and really, really thinking critically about where am I going to be long term, and then building a plan to enhance those skills and building a plan to expand our access to new networks and grow that social capital. And then finally is growing it. So it's practicing that growth mindset. We'll talk more about that in a second. I did a whole webinar on growth mindset a few weeks back, so some of you may have been on that. Navigating change, asking for, giving, and using feedback, and expanding access to new opportunities. So you build a relationship, you set the goals, and then you grow into those goals, make a plan, and reflect on our failures and continue that growth pattern. And so that's really the framework that I think has been really effective for when we've worked with organizations to do this, and figuring out how to build those types of relationships is just really, really crucial and very effective. It's, those relationships and structure around goals is really what makes the mentoring relationship as effective as it is. So a growth mindset, for those of you who are newer to this, it's based on the research by Carol Dweck. We did do a whole webinar on this a few weeks back. The time is so fluid right now. It might have been months ago at this point. I'm not even really sure. But when I send an email with the recording, I'll send you a link to the channel with all of our recorded webinars so you can dig that one up. We spend a solid 45 minutes or so talking about specifically this. But the idea that failure is an opportunity to grow, right? That when I make a mistake, it means that I need to work harder and I can move past that and grow and learn. And the idea that, feedback is constructive. I like to try new things. My effort and attitude determine my abilities, right? And it's in contrast to the fixed mindset, which I think has been particularly pervasive in for a lot of people. And I know it's something that I've struggled with over the past, in the past as well too. The idea that, failure means it's the limit of my abilities, that if I fail, then there's no point in trying anymore because it's just not something I can do. I'm either good at it or I'm not. My abilities are unchanging, my potential is predetermined. That's really that fixed mindset that, a lot of the research has shown us, again, is that this growth mindset is really more, I don't know if true is the right word, but, more true. That we are able to do a lot more than we think we can if we put our minds to it and work at it and learn. And particularly when we're in the workplace, if we want people to grow and develop into leaders and things like that, we need people who are willing and able to learn from their mistakes. And so the best way to coach people with that is through a growth mindset. It's also important for mentors, right? I think a lot of us enter into our relationships with folks around as there's a fixed mindset. This person can do it or they can't, particularly in the workplace where things are like, we don't want to be holding everyone's hand to get everything done all the time. We just want things to be done because we have things we got to get done. And so, it can be a lot easier to just be like, hey, listen, I have this new employee and either they can do it or they can't. I don't have, this isn't about learning and growing. They either can do it or they can't. But with approaching it with a mentoring mindset and a growth mindset is going to help build those mentoring relationships. We also talk a lot about developmental relationships. And if you've been on webinars with us before, you've certainly heard me talk about this. But I think it's a really important framework that can be used across a lot of different organizations and settings. So the idea being that, particularly young people, and we talk about young people, I typically mean, anywhere up to age about like 25. But the reality is that, even as we get, I'm in like my 30s and it's not like I don't need these things either. It's just about how we build structures to help people progress and develop. And so that's providing these 5 different attributes and pieces of support, right? So we need to challenge growth, provide support, expand possibilities, share power, and express care. So these are all things that we're doing through our relationships between mentors and mentees, between manager and, subordinate, whatever it is. So this is not, content. This is not, these are things that can be delivered in a school. This are things that are delivered in a workplace. These are things that could be delivered on a sports team. It's really about the relationship. And so how do you express care? How do you share power and allow people to make decisions? How do you challenge growth and provide support so that way people feel like they can push themselves and make mistakes, but know that, when they do make a mistake, they'll be supported on the way up because we're challenging them and supporting them. We're expanding those possibilities to make sure that they have access to, our networks and other networks and opportunities around the organization to do things that they might not have thought possible. And so, drawing on the developmental relationships framework is really helpful because it allows for us to think more critically about how we build the relationships themselves. What types of things are we doing in here? Today we're doing a project with, I'm doing a project, let's say, with someone I supervise, and I'm going to think about, okay, how is this project that I'm giving them? I'm going to make sure I challenge growth. I'm going to give them something that I think that they might not necessarily be 100% ready for, but I'm going to give it to them anyway. And if they feel like they can't do it, then I'm going to get in there and provide support and, offer my back. Or, we're leading a meeting and I'm going to let them take point this time and share my power with them. There's all sorts of different ways that we can do this day to day. And it's really important, particularly if we want to, approach a lot of the work of, mentoring and our work in the workplace from a mentoring perspective. So a couple final recommendations. Making sure you're aware of power dynamics and mentee growth. It's not always if we're having a formalized mentoring program in the workplace, then, you have to think, do you want the person's supervisor to be their mentor? Do you want someone, from a different team or from a different office, or, there's pros and cons to both of those. And so starting to think about that, because it can be hard to be someone's manager as well as their mentor. Some of the Connect Focus Grow work is about doing that, but it's a delicate line without that particular training and those really dedicated resources to supporting them. Ensuring the mentors are trained and intentional. The last thing we want to do is say we're part of a mentoring program and then just throw people who have never, spent 20 minutes thinking about how to form healthy relationships with people who are most in need of healthier relationships. Closure is really important in things like this, because when the mentoring relationship ends, that doesn't necessarily mean that their relationship in the professional space is also going to end. So we need to make sure we're giving the mentors and mentees the relationship or the skills and tools to renegotiate the relationship. So at that point of closure, it's really just these two people coming together and saying, we were part of this 12-month mentoring program. It was really awesome. This is how we want to have a relationship going forward. Maybe it's just, here's my number and my email. If you need a job recommendation, let me know. Maybe it's, I'd love to continue on, being a part of, mentoring you through your career. Let's keep in touch and keep doing this. Whatever it is, they have to renegotiate that relationship and the dynamics of it. And so people who are running that program have to be able to make sure that they're giving them the skills and tools to be able to do that. Just coaching them through that process, because, closure is just awkward for anyone. And lastly, make sure you celebrate those successes. If it's a time-based program, do a graduation. Really emphasize this is a positive experience that you should be proud of. This isn't some remedial thing because we think you need some extra help because you're lacking. It's, you have some extra potential we want to make sure we're tapping into, and, let's celebrate and help you when you graduate and move on. Let's make that a joyous celebratory occasion, to really emphasize that strength-based perspective. So I'm going to let it open for questions. While you're typing questions, if you want to pull your phone out, and you can point your camera at this little QR code on the screen, and it'll come up with a little link. That'll take you to a little Survey Monkey thing, to take a survey around, how we did today, and any feedback. I'm just taking out my camera to make sure it's working. Yes, wonderful. So while you're doing that, feel free to type any questions, any other thoughts. All right, so if I have any other questions, I'm going to just move on to the next slide. If you didn't get the QR code with the survey, don't worry about it. I'll send a link in my follow-up email. But some next steps, again, the Connect, Focus, Grow is a great framework if you're looking to really take this to the next level. We can talk more about what that looks like. If you want to shoot me an email, my email address is right there. It's a really just a good framework, and we've rolled it out with a few companies over the past year or so with some really strong outcomes. And second, the National Mentoring Resource Center. So for those of you who may know this or might not, but the National Mentoring Resource Center is a way for mentoring programs at schools and nonprofit organizations and things like that to get access to no-cost technical assistance. So you can apply and get access to us as basically a consultant at no cost to you to help you kind of figure out and navigate how to implement, start, strengthen programs around mentoring. So I'll include information about how to apply for that technical assistance in our follow-up email that I'll send out over the next day or two. If you have any other thoughts or questions or want more information on anything more specifically that we talked about, but specifically the Connect, Focus, Grow framework and the training associated with that, or the National Mentoring Resource Center, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is right there, and definitely offer you as much support as we can. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great week. I'll stay on for just a couple of minutes in case people have questions they want to put on here. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.